Good morning. I'm not used to saying that with this crowd. And welcome to everyone attending here at the Park Avenue Club, as well as those attending virtually. My name is Debbie Semi, and as president of Impact100 Garden State, my job today is to speak as little as possible so that you will have the maximum amount of time to hear from our incredible guest speakers. Let me first explain how today's event will run. In order to allow the Park Avenue Club staff to serve lunch and allow for maximum time for our speakers, we will be dividing today's program into two parts. The first part before lunch is served, and the second following lunch. For those of you attending virtually, this means there will be a break in the live stream for about 25 minutes, during which you will see a graphic on the screen. This will allow you to have lunch yourself while our lunch is served, but please be sure to come back as we will resume the live stream with our keynote speaker, Dr. Janet Katoff, at roughly 12:05 p.m. We are so excited that Magee-Women's Research Institute, as a sponsor of Impact Global, offered to host today's lunch and program on why women's health is the core of strong communities. Magee is a leader in research that informs women's health care all over the world. Magee fights for more women in clinical trials and more research dedicated to women's health and reproductive biology. Magee is a change maker, transforming women's lives and creating a better future for us all. I have the honor of introducing our first speaker, but as a way of doing so, I would like us all to think about something for a minute. None of us attending this event today would be here if Wendy Steele had not created in 2001 what would become known as the Impact100 model of collective giving. Without Wendy, women in more than 65 impact chapters worldwide would not have been empowered to become engaged in philanthropy. Without Wendy, $123 million of transformational giving would not have been donated. Here in our Impact's 5 counties, that would have meant over $3 million not spent in desperately needed programs in our local communities. Thank heavens Wendy did lead the way for all of us as founder and CEO of Impact100 Global, a grassroots worldwide movement in women's philanthropy. Wendy has received national awards for her philanthropic work, including the 2014 Jefferson Award for Public Service, which is considered the Nobel Prize for community service. Today, as author of the best-selling book, Invitation to Impact, Lighting the Path to Community Transformation, Wendy provides inspiration through her personal story to increase women's impact through generosity and high-impact grants. To my fellow women who make a difference, Wendy gets us. She writes in Invitation to Impact, "I knew that the community needed these women. It needed their hearts, their brains, and their checkbooks. These women needed to know what it felt like to be part of the solution. They needed a viable path to community service and philanthropy that matched their current ever-changing lives." We are all so grateful that Wendy's vision and passion has provided us with that viable path to community service and philanthropy and enabled us to be part of the solution that she created as Impact100 Garden State members. Please welcome Wendy Steele.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Debbie, and thank you all for being here. I understand that this is perhaps the biggest gathering of Garden State members since maybe ever, but certainly since before the pandemic. So thank you on this glorious day that you've come out. And thank you for the work that you're doing. As Debbie said, Impact100 Garden State has been around for more than 10 years, and you all have given away more than $3 million. Now, please. Now, when we think about $3 million, we recognize how significant that is. We recognize how transformational that is. But I want you to think back about what happens each and every year. Every year, you all have given away at least one grant of $100,000 to your community. As local women, you've researched, identified, and found the nonprofits in your community that are solving the most pressing problems. And then you have funded them. Now, what I want you to think about is imagine that $100,000 going into the community. Through that grant, job skills are learned, people are fed, they're educated, they're nurtured, they're made safe, they're healed. That $100,000 didn't come from a government program. It didn't come from private enterprise. It came from women just like you who saw the problems and said, not on my watch. We are going to do something different. And you have. Now, we can talk more about all that your chapter has already accomplished. And if you haven't seen the 10th anniversary magazine, you really need to, because it gives not only a deep dive about the grants that you've made, but it tells the story of your entrepreneurial founders, your change makers, who said, it's great that this concept exists, but it's time it come here to New Jersey. That's how Impact100 Garden State started, and that's how it's flourishing today. Debbie gave a little bit of the origin story of what prompted me to create Impact100 in the first place. And it was really with two very distinct goals. One, as she indicated, it was to empower women. It was to light the path to true community transformation, to show women everywhere that you have enough to make a significant difference, that you know enough, and that what you have, when pulled together with your neighbors, your friends, and your colleagues, can make a lasting difference. It was also created because I knew from serving on nonprofit boards and from volunteering in a variety of capacities, nonprofits needed significant grants. Make no mistake that when you get a small grant, when you get a grant for $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000, that grant is amazing. It is important. But what it doesn't allow the nonprofit leaders to fully execute on a program, to really try something new, to move the needle. And because of that, Impact100 was named to represent the impact every 100 women brings to her local community. Now, I had the idea, Impact100 was conceived prior to 9/11. It was the summer of 2001 when I was on vacation in northern Michigan with my children, when everything I had heard from women in Cincinnati kept repeating in my mind. It was then that I got out a spiral notebook and I wrote down exactly what women had been telling me. They had been telling me about all the barriers they felt to getting involved. I took the kids home, we got them back in school, and then 9/11 happened. Impact 100 started in a post-9/11 world. When I gathered 15 women who had skills I didn't have, networks I didn't know, and I said, is the time now? Are we the right people to do this? We saw our country and our community as more vulnerable than we ever could have imagined, and we took action. Fast forward, that $123 million. That is thanks to women like you. $123 million raised $1,000 at a time from women like you. So here we are at the official kickoff. When I look around, when I see the news, what I see is now more than ever, we need more philanthropists. We need more women like your bold founders. We need more women like every one of you who've ever been a member. Whether you were a member for a year or two and have lapsed, whether you've been a member from the beginning, whether you didn't even know Impact 100 existed until shortly before you came to this event, we need you. You don't need any special skills. You don't need to have known the founders. There is no secret handshake. What you need is the desire to make a significant impact right here in your own backyard. You are invited. Now you're here because someone saw some spark in you and said, maybe she'll join Impact 100. So I want you to look around the room and understand that many of the women who are here have been a part of the story of Impact 100 in one way or the other. If this is your first time, I hope you'll consider joining. If this is your 11th time, I hope you'll continue to re-up. But when you look around to see who's here, I want you to also notice who isn't. Who are the women that still don't know about one of New Jersey's best kept secrets? Who are the women that need to be introduced to Impact 100? You know, approximately half the women who join in any given chapter have never donated $1,000 to a single charity prior to joining their Impact 100 chapter. That was me. When I created the Impact 100 model, I was 38 years old. I had never given a check for $1,000 to a single charity, but I knew I could, and I knew it would matter if I did. And you all know where we are now. This year's team has a bold and audacious goal. Last year, 375 women came together to give away $375,000. However, this year, there is a lofty goal. Imagine the difference in your community if 400 women come together and you can give 4 transformational grants. That would be a game changer. Now, your board is fully volunteer. It always has been, and it likely always will be, which means as you sit in the audience and you say, they are so great and they work so hard, what I would like to say is we will not reach a goal of 400 women unless each of us does our part to invite our friends, our colleagues, our book club, our churches, our school boards, and on and on and on. If there are women that need to be invited to the party of philanthropy, then please extend the invitation. Connect them with your leadership team. You've got a really strong, amazing team right here. And help us achieve what many could only dream of. We have so much to celebrate today, and part of that is this idea that we really are stronger and better together. When we link arms with women who are seasoned philanthropists for whom this $1,000 check is simply one piece of their philanthropy portfolio, and we start to assess the grant applications that come in, and we evaluate where we would like to see our big grants go, what we know to be true is that there is no one better to determine that than local women committed to making the world a better place. I cannot wait to see what you all will do, but I'm betting you're going to be giving away 4 grants in your next cycle. So I hope you will commit to do that and to celebrate, and let me know so I can celebrate with you. Now, the main event today is an amazing opportunity to meet some of the incredible people at the Magee-Women's Research Institute. We are so fortunate to have with us Mike Anakin, who is the CEO of Magee, as well as Dr. Janet Kadoff, who is incredible, and they are going to share a lot more with you. If you're interested in how our 2 organizations got together, you will see this one-pager that you can take your time to understand. We are in for a real treat. Knowledge is power. I'm very happy to introduce Mike, who has an impressive background in business and venture capital. He works tirelessly and travels more than anyone I know to ensure Magee's top-tier science isn't just stored in research clinics, but instead he uses partnerships, philanthropy, and conversations just like this one to ensure that this knowledge that comes from the research scientists and collaborations of MWRI is placed in the hands of individuals around the globe who can benefit. He is literally changing the narrative on women's health. Please join me in welcoming Michael Anakin.
So first I want to thank Wendy, and then I want to thank all of you. You know, Impact100 Global and Local is just an amazing organization. We have a little saying in our research quarters. We say, research is not our goal, it's simply a tool. Impact is our goal. And you share that goal with us. We want to make global impact, you want to make local impact, and that's why it makes sense for us to lock arms and take this journey together. So I'm going to share with you some things about the state of women's health in the United States today. I'm also going to share with you some things about our research institute and how we're trying to change that so that you can help be our voice in your community, because we need one. So you're asking yourself, who is Magee-Women's Research Institute, and why are they talking to us in New Jersey when they're an organization out of Pittsburgh? Well, Magee's the largest research institute in the United States that's focused on women's health. We have 380 faculty and staff that are working on over 319 active studies. We cover 292 conditions of the female body. We use the word conditions and not disease states because conditions like menopause or pregnancy impact women, but aren't necessarily diseases. We study those too. All the benign gynecology that we study, that falls into that consideration. And over the years, we've had 162,000 women come through our clinical trials. Fairly significant. When we talk about where we came from and what we are frozen again. We are trying to make global impact. We have collaborations in 20 different countries on 5 continents. We are truly a world leader when it comes to creating the knowledge that's utilized in healthcare systems all over the globe for women's health. But we couldn't do what we do without partners. We need partners like foundations, universities, and even industry to get our research, our science into the market. But we also need partners like Impact100 to help tell our story. 7 years ago when I got here, we were about 23 years old at the time, and we had no voice. We were led by scientists, and we were doing the best science in the world. And when I would give a talk at Columbia University to a bunch of OBGYN, they would immediately know who Magee was. But when I gave a talk in an audience like this, no one knew who Magee was. And we knew we had to change that, because we're not going to make the impact we need to make without women in the lay community understanding the value of what we bring to the table. And that's why, as Wendy said, I travel more than anyone she knows, because I have conversations like this on a daily basis with groups around the country and around the globe to talk about the impact of women's health and the research that we do. Our research spans 9 months to 90 years. We start with pregnancy and early human development, and we go all the way up through diseases of aging, like pelvic floor or heart disease or cancer, right? Those are all issues that we cover, and everything in between, like infectious disease or fertility or benign gynecology. And those are critically important to women who not only reside in areas where they have major medical centers, major academic medical centers, large urban centers, but also women in Middle America or women in India, Africa, South America who maybe don't have access to that type of care. The knowledge that we create needs to be given to those communities on a regular basis, and we need your help in doing that. We need you to help us lock arms and be that voice. Our values center around value number 1, impact. It's in your name. We know you value that. Impact is our number 1 goal. We want to help women not only today, but for generations to come. Convergence is our number 2 value. We know that the collective energy we can create, both locally and globally, by accessing chapters like yours who can create a local buzz about some of the work that we do, as well as mentoring, bringing up the next generation of scientists. We talked about it earlier with some of you in the courtyard. Science takes a long time. Medical innovation doesn't happen overnight. We have to be prepared for that next generation to take the baton and run with it. And then openness. We share the fruits of our labor with the rest of the world. We're not a for-profit entity. We're a not-for-profit. We create knowledge vis-a-vis the papers that we publish every year. Almost 300 papers a year published out of our institute that helps define what the future of women's health is going to be. We know the future of healthcare is going to be patient-centric. Gone are the days of volume-based systems. We're looking to transform healthcare into a value-based approach, which really puts an onus on research. We know that as a world leader in the space, it's our responsibility not only to make sure that we create solutions in the lab, but those solutions get to the clinic, to the community, and ultimately to the home where they can make a difference. How about if I just point at you when I needed to move on? You know, it's funny. We missed a couple slides early, probably because we were trying to go through this, and I may have hit this once or twice too many times. But, you know, we started this journey in 1992 with 4 researchers in the basement of the hospital. And we've grown to the point where we have 380 researchers, where we've delivered $400 million worth of research to the community. And what we don't realize when we talk to audiences like this is that the field of women's health was not established until the NIH Revitalization Act of 1993. That was the first time in our history that women were allowed to be enrolled in clinical trials. Who here was alive in 1993? In our lifetime, right? We are a brand new field. And we're not going to get where we need to go without a significant amount of catch-up, okay? So I'm gonna share with you some examples where we've created solutions that have worked and solutions that have not worked in our field in that 30-year period. And we're gonna learn from the ones that didn't, and we're gonna double down on the ones that did, and we're gonna try and emulate that in other spaces in women's health. So HIV, highly effective therapies were developed in 1995. Who here remembers a guy by the name of Magic Johnson, right? He came down with HIV in the 90s, and all of a sudden, we've got this therapy available called triple therapy, where he is now living with HIV 30 plus years later. That didn't happen in the 80s, right? In 2011, Science magazine said that those that were on those therapies could no longer transmit the disease to their partners. But in 2019, at the State of the Union address delivered by the president at the time, he said that HIV was an epidemic in the United States, that 1.1 million Americans were living with HIV, and that it was the largest killer of women aged 15 to 24. So what happened? We had a solution in the 90s. In 2011, 10 years before this statement was made, we identified that that solution was working well. So why didn't it get to where it needed to go? Well, that's because this became the face of HIV, right? HIV was no longer a gay man's disease, but it had transformed into a young woman's disease. And where condom use couldn't be negotiated, women were contracting HIV at high rates. So what did we do as Magee in Pittsburgh? We went to work to solve for this problem in these communities, right? We went to Africa. We understood, we sat down with the young women that were getting HIV. We understood what the challenges were. We said, what's happening here? And here what it was condom use couldn't be negotiated. A $6,000 a month drug regimen couldn't be afforded. So what we did was we created a Nuva-style ring that delivered an antiretroviral that could deliver this antiretroviral locally and discreetly when condom use couldn't be negotiated. This ring stopped the spread of HIV by 30% in a clinical trial in Africa. 11,000 women. We stopped the spread of HIV by 30%. We then made a Listerine-style strip that can be inserted into the vagina that can be delivered for less than a penny. That can be manufactured. That can solve for the problem, right? It's that way of thinking where we go into the community and we understand the challenges, much like what you do every year with your local nonprofits. That's how we're going to solve for this. Women's health needs a collective voice, a collective understanding of some of the issues that are most challenging to us. One of the big wins we've had is breast cancer. Who here has been touched by breast cancer? Who here? Yeah, family members touched by it. 1 in 8 women will face breast cancer. The good news is we've made significant strides in the last decade, right? Those of you who have been on that journey know that the journey looks very different today than it did 10 years ago. In 20% of the cases, we don't even treat breast cancer anymore because we don't need to. It's no need to fill your body with toxic chemicals like chemotherapy when we know we have other solutions that will work, right? That's because of research dollars that were put to use. Research makes a difference, but we can't do that without a better understanding of many of these diseases, right? We look at research that was done in breast cancer and the dollars that flowed into that, and we hold that up as our shining star. And while we still have a ways to go, we haven't fully solved for that. We're well on our way compared to a lot of other things that impact women's health. And I'll tell you that we just introduced 2 weeks ago a vaccine trial at Magee for a breast cancer vaccine. Now, breast cancer is 18 different diseases. It's not just one disease. So we don't think we'll cure all types of breast cancer, but we do think we're going to cure several types of breast cancer with our vaccine. We do think we can translate vaccine to ovarian cancer and other types of cancer that are throughout the body. So we're showing promise. Where dollars go, we know we can make a difference. Research makes a difference. But there's other things that affect women in a very kind of what we'll call a pestery way. But we call it benign gynecology in the space. It doesn't necessarily kill you, but on average, endometriosis takes 11 years and 7 different doctors to diagnose. Why is that? Because not enough research or not enough understanding is given to those types of disease. And as women, we need to sort of understand that we collectively need to make more noise, right? We need to drive more dollars into those spaces so that we can have a better understanding of why we suffer from the things we suffer from and how we can move the needle. We know that women's health impacts cultures all over the globe. But what we also know is that women give birth to 100% of the future. So if we're not investing in women, right, we're not investing in the future of society. We need to invest in women. We need to better understand why it is that maternal mortality in this country is rising when every other developed country is dropping, right? It's actually safer to be a cop on duty in the United States than it is to be a pregnant woman. You have a better chance of dying at the table as a pregnant woman than you do a cop on duty. That's not okay. That's not acceptable in the richest country in the world with arguably the best healthcare system in the world, right? Why are black babies dying at a rate that's more than twice that of what white babies are dying from? We don't know, but we need to find out, right? And putting a label on it's not finding out. Calling it systemic racism isn't getting to the root of the problem. We need to do more. We need to invest in these problems that impact different audiences differently. And we need to better understand them because ultimately they all fall under the umbrella of women's health. So they become my responsibility. And I'm here today talking to you to help make it your responsibility, right? Because women's health impacts all of us, not just some of us. There's lots of ways to get involved, right? As they always say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. What I'm going to ask you to do is be my voice in your community, right? Talk to your employers about it. There's lots of, you've come together, 100 women strong, giving $1,000 each. I'm trying to raise $100 million by going out there and talking to communities of 100 million women that can each give $100 each, right? We want to take our message global. We want to understand the power of not only investing in women, but also creating a collective voice and an energy that allows us to continue to invest in women and make a difference, that we have 30 years of research behind us, which means the medical journals and the textbooks that are being delivered today to our doctors, they don't have the most relevant information. Knowledge isn't spread out evenly, right? So we have to be our own advocates in the doctor's office. And I know I'm up here, I'm not a woman, as you may have noticed. But I can tell you, I'm here fighting that fight for you. So let's see if we can play the video. And this is my ask of you.
Let's change. Let's change the odds for the toughest infertility cases. Let's change survival rates for triple-negative breast cancer. Let's change outcomes for moms struggling with opioid addiction. Let's change the gender bias in medical research. Let's change the way the world treats women at Magee-Women's.org.
That's my ask. Help me change the way the world treats women, really. I mean, at the end of the day, we all in this room need to stick together and make a difference. And I love what you've done. Over $100 million invested in local projects. Let's invest globally in women's health together and make a difference for all of us. I think it's lunchtime. I'm going to bring up Kelly, and she's going to tell you her Magee story. She has a Magee story, and I thought it was incredible that everywhere I go in the country, I get a Magee story. And I'd like Kelly to share it with you because she's one of you.
First of all, I just really want to thank Deb and Wendy. I'm a proud Impact100 Garden State member, and I really appreciate all the work that you do and the way that you help all of us leverage our ability to make an impact in our communities. And I want to thank you, Mike, and all of your colleagues at Magee for the critical work you do on women's health care. The topic today, research on women's heart health, intersects really closely with the work I do, and I have my professional hat on. I work with Congresswoman Cheryl, who introduced the HEART Act as one of her first bills this Congress as part of her Jersey Strong agenda, and it's focused on expanding our knowledge of cardiovascular health to better diagnose, prevent, and treat illnesses in women. And she just wanted me to pass on how grateful we are for all the work that you guys do every day in this space, and she's there fighting for you as well. But what I'm actually really here to talk to you about today is my personal connection to Magee. When I saw this event come through my email, it was such a surprise. I don't usually equate Magee with my life here in New Jersey, but I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, a little bit north of Pittsburgh. And when my mom was diagnosed with endometrial uterine cancer in 2009, Magee was, of course, where she was directed for treatment. So Mike gave you sort of the global perspective. I'm going to take you down to the local perspective. And those of us who really have known about Magee for a very, very long time and appreciated the work that they do. It was a really tough diagnosis for her, and an even tougher road for her in terms of the treatment, included both having internal radiation and chemotherapy. But you would never meet anyone who was so dedicated and grateful to the team that cared for her at Magee as my mom was. She truly knew how lucky she was to be benefiting from the vast expertise. She completed her treatments and was cancer-free for 12 more years. Precious years with her grandchildren, living to attend graduations and violin recitals. Some of those might have not been so great to go to, but I don't have any professional violinists in my family, but she had five amazing grandchildren. She made loads of English pancakes and sausage rolls for them to devour. She got to see one of her grandchildren be married and even became a great-grandmother 4 days before she died. And in that time, she also founded an annual event in Erie, Pennsylvania called Seeds of Hope to benefit Magee in gratitude for all that they had given to her. Yesterday, by coincidence, was the 2-year anniversary of her death. And while that is tremendously sad, I have wrapped my head around how lucky we were, given the seriousness of her diagnosis, to have had the gift of those extra years that came really thanks to Magee. And in this week especially, I am so grateful to Impact100 for unexpectedly giving me this opportunity to say thank you.
We're going to move on with the program, and go ahead and keep eating. But one of the things that I get to do is I get to support an amazing cast of researchers, and it really gives me great pleasure to introduce the next one. Dr. Katoff, she is an epidemiologist by training. She's also does a lot of research in the field of cardiology. She leads our community-based research programs, and she does absolutely amazing work. And I think, for you guys to hear directly from the researchers about some of the work we have going on at Magee, I think it'll give you a whole new perspective about why women's health is important. So without further ado, I'll bring up Dr. Janet Katoff.
It's really lovely to be here with you. I want to thank Debbie, Wendy, the Impact100. Also, Mike, thanks for the kind words. Nick, who kind of totally convinced me to come. And I was like, oh my goodness, so grateful that I'm here with you and have a chance to meet you all. I'm going to talk a bit about my work. I'm going to try to not bore you with my data, but I'm a scientist, I'm an epidemiologist. The data are just sort of so invigorating for me, but I'm going to try to tell you a little bit of the story and not bore you with too many of the details, both of the kind of what we're up to in my group, and also a little bit of the story of what's happened in my research, really through innovation that was made possible through funding from folks like you. So I'm going to give it a go and tell you a bit about what we're up to. My work really is inspired, motivated, and dedicated to this fact that heart disease is the #1 killer of women. It actually kills more women each year than all cancers combined. And importantly, it's a little bit different in women relative to men. So this slide I think just sort of points it out. So sorry, this is one of my data slides, but you can see age across the bottom, and then what it shows is the rate of a first heart attack. So you can see, not surprisingly, that the risk of a first heart attack increases as we age. The rates for women are the line at the bottom. The rates for men are the line at the top, so women have lower rates overall. Importantly, you can see if you sort of imagine a line around age 50, which is the average age of menopause, it's not as though the rate increases post-menopause. It's just that there's more women older and the risk actually increases. But then importantly, this dashed line that you see on the other axis shows the rate of folks who die following a first heart attack. And that younger women, although heart attack is rare, they die at rates 2 times higher than men. And why is that? And we know now it's complex. Some of it is because heart attack gets undiagnosed and therefore less aggressively treated, but some of it is because the causes are different as well. And then one more piece of this story is, again, this is kind of wonky data-driven, but what it shows is just average blood pressure across the life course, because my work is really studying early markers of heart disease risk in younger and younger women, and blood pressure is an important part of that story. And the graph on the left shows, that you may not be able to see it, that blood pressure on average is lower in women at younger ages, and that at higher ages it's actually higher. But when plotted differently, and we look at actually the rate of increase, you can see that quietly, subtly, but importantly, blood pressure is increasing more rapidly in women relative to men. So you can see that it's not until we have enough data to actually be able to understand trends and sort of quiet accumulation, if you will, of risk, that we begin to see a little bit of what might be happening in terms of heart disease in women. And then this is another kind of wonky slide. These are called survival curves. It basically shows, you know, how many folks are alive over these data show 25 years. Time 0 is the time that a woman has a baby. So my work focuses on pregnancy and clues to early cardiovascular disease. So these data start at time 0, which is when a woman has a baby. The red line shows at the top, as we get older, our risk of death increases from cardiovascular disease. The dashed line at the bottom shows that if you have this very specific hypertension in pregnancy, your risk of death is 8 times higher. And again, sort of why? What is it about that pregnancy complication that leads to early death in affected women? And this data, so this is now more than 20 years ago, it was inspired by this and the questions it raised that completely sparked my own research. So my very first project as a PhD student was interviewing women at age 80 about their babies and about their pregnancies. And when I tried to accumulate a dissertation committee, the statistician was like, oh really? You really think something that happened 40 years ago is gonna make a difference at age 80? And I was like, yes, I think so. Only I didn't invite him on my committee because he seemed like a negative node, so I didn't ask him. But unbelievably, I learned so much from those women. My first published papers, which of course is beautiful, but the way women talked about their pregnancies, their stories, it inspired me, and it actually kind of motivated me to press on forward, because I realized that pregnancy is just this life-changing, profound experience that women uniquely have, and that there is a unique biology connected to that, but also, importantly, a life story that we can leverage. So I learned a lot from these data and where it took me next. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but we now know 20 years forward that a whole bunch of pregnancy complications, hypertension, gestational diabetes, preterm delivery, the data are accumulating, are all associated with 2, 3, 4 times higher risk of heart disease. And our group is trying to understand why. And our work over the past 10 years has focused on the placenta. My kids would tell me, as they have, Mom, placenta is really not a word people say at the dinner table. So I'm sorry that I have kind of busted into your lunch with my placenta work. But we've been looking at vascular clues on the maternal side of the placenta as maybe early tissue markers of a susceptibility to vascular disease later in life. So our work has looked at the placenta related to the severity of a pregnancy complication, future pregnancy risk. We've published on all of these. Importantly, could it give us clues about future risk for heart disease? And our current project is now also looking at maternal brain and early markers of small vessel impairments in the placenta and how they might be clues to small vessel problems in mom's brain as early as age 40. I know everyone's grimacing like, oh no, but the importance is if we could understand this, could we begin to actually intervene earlier, right? So that's really the hope. And then at the bottom, as I said, while we're all about looking for answers to what we don't know, and there is still so much we don't know, we do know a few things. So if, for example, we know that women with certain complications are at higher risk for heart disease, could we do basic lifestyle interventions in, for example, the year after pregnancy and change that course? So while there's lots we don't know, could we begin to take what we have learned and implement it in interventions? And that's what the story I want to share with you. And parallel to this, Mike sort of queued this story up about this maternal mortality crisis in this country. We know that rates of maternal death are higher in this country than every other developed country, profound race disparities, and also the baseline risks among white women is also higher compared to white women in European countries. Like what and the why of this. And without, again, going into the details, the purple bars show you how all of these rates increased even further during COVID. So the most vulnerable, most susceptible women were the most severely and negatively impacted by COVID. These rates have not yet begun to move. And talking again about disparities, unlike all other health conditions, the risk of a woman dying due to pregnancy in Black women relative to white women is actually highest at the highest levels of education, 5 times higher among college-educated women. So again, why? And it's not until we gather the data, this data for the very first time is now tracked by the Centers for Disease Control. But as Mike sort of already hinted, that's really recent. We didn't even look at these data in this way until very recently. And then I want to tell you a little bit about what we know. And again, this is causes of maternal death, and I've circled for you the ones that are cardiovascular related. So more than half have a connection to overall cardiovascular health. So if someone would help me keep track of time so that I don't go over, I want to tell you a little bit story about one of our projects which started completely funded by a philanthropic gift from a local foundation. I'll tell you, it launched really in a conversation like we're having here today by a woman at that foundation whose daughter had just had really scary, severe preeclampsia. And she was like, Janet, we need to understand what we can do about this. And starting with a pretty modest gift, philanthropic gift, we did our first intervention trial. Not to bore you with the details, but we did it in a pretty robust way. We enrolled women right at the time of delivery, randomized them to 3 different interventions. We paired them with a coach. We gave them access to education information, taught them how to measure their own blood pressure for a year. In this project, we enrolled 150 women, and we collected 14,000 blood pressure measures. And we're really committed to this because it not only teaches us something very important about what happens to blood pressure after pregnancy, something we know nothing about. We also empower women to measure their own blood pressure, teach them to do it, like really put that information and that tool in their hands. And importantly, we partnered with a local agency, community-based agency, Healthy Start, funded by HRSA, who was really active in our community and focused on Black women's health. And that was really important because we really wanted to take the research into the community. They commissioned a video, which I'm not going to show you, to teach about preeclampsia, and these were the data. Most importantly, we didn't even know if women would enroll in a study focused on their own health when they just had a baby, and all their attention is focused on taking care of that baby. Almost 90% of women enrolled who were eligible, really saying, 90% stayed enrolled. Like, people enrolled and they stayed enrolled. They were really interested. So that was probably our most important finding. And if you look at the bar on the left and it's blood pressure, we didn't have enough women in our study to have robust enough differences, but this was impactful enough for us to say, this might make a difference. Blood pressure could actually be improved by enrolling in this very simple lifestyle intervention. And that $200,000 project led to what we've just launched, which is now a $2.5 million project funded by the NIH that is focused on eliminating Black-white disparities in blood pressure in the year after pregnancy. So really taking the lessons we learned from our pilot trial and really focused on, this is some newer data again. The story at the top was in the New York Times just a couple of months ago, showing the increased risk of dying after a hypertensive disorder of pregnancy is actually larger in the months after delivery than it is at the actual time of delivery. So women go home with this risk, and there's no real way to monitor it. And then again, there's this newer attention about the importance of the time after a woman goes home after having a baby. Here's our team, very diverse. We have community partners, psychiatrists, cardiology, family medicine, all working together on this community-based project where we pair women with a postpartum doula. We've all might have heard about doulas at birth, which are really important support people and advocates. This is a postpartum doula. I didn't even know they existed, but our community partners taught me about the value of postpartum doulas they're actually working with moms in the home, doing maybe what our grandmothers might have offered us back in the day, but those systems don't often exist anymore. So this is a person who's trained, she's from the community, she's offering things like supporting mom, even running errands for mom, but we've trained them to be actually heart health teachers. So they go through this extensive training about the importance of blood pressure, diet, exercise. We pair them with a health coach, but the whole crux of the intervention is really leveraging these postpartum doulas. We're really keen on these devices. Women really like them. So again, we teach women to measure their own blood pressure. We give them a scale. That sounds very basic, but I have to tell you, out of all the fancy things we're giving people, getting a scale turns out to be the thing they're really happy about. And a Fitbit, so they can track their steps and activity. And then, technology is amazing. They give us permission, and we can actually upload every single one of their measures, their activity every day, every time they weigh themselves, and their blood pressure. So we get all of these data so we can understand both if our intervention is impactful and why and how might it be impactful. And I just want to add, so we're doing that. We just started. We're going to enroll 450 women. We've enrolled 12. We actually just got started. As you heard, science is a slow business. We need the answers now. But importantly, we're being pushed. I think I'm learning something, but I am learning as much from my community partners as I hope they might be learning from us. So I'm hopeful that we're going to get better, faster, and smarter about what are the ways that we can improve women's health. This project is focused on the 1 year after pregnancy, and our hope is that if women could be healthier in that 1 year, they'll be healthier in 5 and 10, and maybe their families as well. We know, for example, that women are the #1 referral source for their families in terms of physician care and medical care. So not only is women's health important for us as women and for, you know, our babies, but for our larger families and our larger communities. And you know, and one of the real joys, there are many, to being able to do this kind of work is then to be able to dream about what's the next work. We're hungry for the next project while we do this slow business of gathering our answers. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of 1,000 days of maternal health, because we know we study women a lot during pregnancy. We're beginning to think about how to study and improve women's health in the year after having had a baby. But we know that the healthier women are entering pregnancy, the healthier their pregnancies will be and their long-time health. As I've said to my kids, like, you really don't need to be a fancy researcher to know that the healthier women are entering pregnancy, the healthier their pregnancy is going to go. But we really have no ways of studying that. We've got really not great paradigms. There's this notion in pediatric health that's called 1,000 days of life, right? Pregnancy and the first 2 years of life really shape a child's health. I've begun to think about this idea of 1,000 days of maternal health. It's about the year before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after pregnancy. I may not be able to study, although I would love to, the whole life cycle. I'm going to be sort of pooped by the time that I get around to that. I'm hoping that my trainees will keep that work going. But 1,000 days of maternal health, if we could really begin to understand what are the drivers of problems, what are the factors that improve health, and how can we begin to bring that information to women, bring the evidence into the clinic, so that we can really change some of these patterns, while we're making the more profound fundamental biology discoveries also incredibly important. I partner with folks who are looking at the molecular and cellular level, how is estrogen impacting cell function? That's all happening as well. And I think we can partner with women and actually begin to improve their health while we're actually, continue the important studies. So that's my story. I have 2 more thank you slides. Always like to do a shout out to some of our youngest supporters, born at our hospital. And just an idea of how many people it takes to be able to do the kind of work I am fortunate enough to do, from senior mentors to trainees, all of the funding that makes it possible, and the amazing partners I have to be able to do the work we do. So with that, I'll close, and thank you very much.
Oh, all right. We're going to pause for some questions. Preeti has got the mic, and there she is right there. Yeah, Janet, why don't you stay up here so we can get you in the camera. If you have a question for Dr. Katoff, just raise your hand. Preeti will come around with the mic, and we even have a camera, so you will even be on film. Somebody back there? Okay.
Hi, Dr. Katoff. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Could you talk a bit about how women's health affects their communities, in addition to their being the #1 source of referrals for medical
Yeah, great point. How women's health affects their communities. We are, I think it's an actually understudied area. As Mike pointed out, women carry 100% of the future, so that's an obvious one. I think you all are an example. Oh my goodness, look at the power and passion and leadership that you all kind of bring from the community, and then back, sort of gather information and ideas and then take them back, right? So there's this back and forth. And I guess, I'm thinking now more specifically, I've been thinking a lot about, for example, this idea, as I shared with you, about 1,000 days of maternal health. My dream is, how do we improve the overall health of the whole community? Because that is actually, you know, women don't live in their isolated, although we may be more isolated than we want to be, we live in communities, we live in a larger space. And if we could improve the overall health of that larger space, I actually think we all benefit, but how do we do that? And so we're starting with a focus on women's health, maternal health, and now saying, how do we bring that into the larger community? So one of the pilot projects that's been a bit of a spin-off of our work has been targeting one community outside of Pittsburgh and saying, because they've already done some amazing work. They've built a walking path, right? So we're actually trying to train, starting with our women's health, maternal health focus, trying to train community heart health advocates. And we're partnering with other groups like the American Heart Association and others in the community. And what does that look like? So I think women are both change makers, as we heard. They are also perhaps specifically paying attention to these kinds of issues, and I think have great potential to be change makers even within their own families and communities. So that's sort of my thought. Hope that helps. Maybe you have ideas. How do you think? What do you think?
Well, I think that women often control their family's diet.
Yeah.
I think that the more women are educated and have opportunities, for example, immigrants to learn the language and get out and work, the better off their families are. I think women perhaps are more likely to notice that the playground is, has some jagged metal in it, and we need to do better and gather. And just so on a really ground level, they're so involved with their families, that's got to radiate out.
Excellent point, and I'm glad you brought up the piece about nutrition. Our health coach at our last meeting was making a smoothie, and she's like, I'm trying to get my husband to drink these smoothies. He's a little resistant, but I'm making progress, right? So we're talking about the moms we're working with, and she's also trying to really impact her family's health as well. I think that's such an important point. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. It's really, really interesting. It's wonderful what you're doing. I wonder, have you ever studied the correlation between marital status and the health status? Because it seems to me that single women must be so overwhelmed when they have a baby that they don't have any energy or resources to care for their own health.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'm going to answer it, but I also think it points to a larger challenge, which is these things we call social determinants of health. We know that there are things larger than our own individual behaviors that impact our health. And I think you bring up one of them around marital status. We also tend to think of it as support. A couple things about marital status. We know it matters. We also know that it's actually culturally defined. So we have to broaden the ways we think about marriage, because that's one definition of support. There are others as well. So people may be living together but not married, right? We have to sort of update. I think it's really isolation that is the challenge, and that there are many ways to be less isolated. So we now are asking about not only marital status, which we are, but actually about support, social support, and what does that mean? So one of the pieces of our intervention, for example, is to say, if you need to go to the emergency room because you have dangerously high blood pressure and your 4-week-old, like, who's going to watch your 4-week-old baby? Because that turns out to be a barrier. Women say, well, I got this advice that I should go to the emergency room, but I have no one to watch the baby. So these are the kinds of, so I think being married is a piece of the story, and the story is broader, probably around support, and that it's really isolation and these burdens of having to carry everything yourself that is really detrimental to health. Thanks for that.
Hi, how are you? I do have a question regarding COVID. I and a few other people that I know, women, have been affected out of the blue after vaccination and after COVID with high blood pressure. And I mean, high blood pressure. And I was wondering if any research has started along those lines to figure out what the heck happened.
You know, it continues to come out. It's a great point. You know, I shared with you a little bit of the really dangerous impact of COVID during pregnancy. And to share with you, so I don't know the answer, but we know that there is probably some vascular response that we still need to understand. So stay tuned. I'm sorry, that's an unsatisfying answer. But to expand upon that, you know, gosh, we lived together through this unbelievable time of COVID, and you know, many of us were just so grateful and hungry for vaccines when they were finally available, but pregnant women were not included in the first vaccine trials. So the uptake of the vaccine was about 12 to 18 months delayed in pregnant women relative to non-pregnant adults. And this is a really, you know, we don't want to be reckless about our research, but sometimes under the guise of, well, you know what, this is a really complicated time, you know, it's the women's health, it's the health of her baby when she's pregnant, but in fact, we do women a disservice by not including them in trials, like, for example, the COVID vaccine trials, because we now know it's safe and it actually saves lives. I shared with you the data about the impact of COVID. I sit on our maternal mortality review committee for our whole regional set of hospitals. And, you know, those COVID deaths were tragic. Tragic because many of them happened after vaccine was available, but in that period before there was, you know, women are understandably cautious about what is safe during pregnancy, but sometimes without the right sort of evidence and then encouragement by physicians, that women can delay important therapies that we know saves lives. So I don't have an answer for you, but I suspect we are going to continue to learn about the vascular impacts. We've been super focused on the devastating respiratory effects, but we know there are probably vascular effects as well. And that's probably a piece of what's driving the maternal susceptibility during pregnancy as well. So stay tuned. That is such an unsatisfying answer, but yeah, thanks for that important question.
So just this weekend, we were having a big family discussion with my son-in-law, who's in medical school, about the biases of treating women in childbirth for pain based on race. Mm-hmm. And so my question is, are you doing anything to study that? What are your insights? What can be done? What is your institution doing about educating doctors and healthcare practitioners and advice to women or men who are in that situation?
Yeah, it's, again, such an important point. We know that there's just this constellation of multifactorial issues, and you bring up an important one, which is how are folks actually treated when they come for care? Because that not only has immediate impact about what does or does not happen. Are they getting state-of-the-art guideline concordant care, or is there something else that gets in the way? I think that's really important. But again, if women have a bad experience, if they're not listened to, if they're not taken seriously, are they really going to want to go back to the doctor? You know, maybe not, right? So the way we are treated can often impact what we're willing to do the next time we're pregnant or the next time we're sick. So important. In the study that I shared with you that we are just beginning, a whole aspect of that study is actually looking at bias and treatment during and after pregnancy. So who is getting sort of state-of-the-art care according to the best evidence and guidelines? For example, we don't know how to prevent preeclampsia, but a simple intervention like low-dose aspirin in those that are at high risk for preeclampsia can reduce the rate of preeclampsia by about 10%. So is everyone who's eligible getting that very, very simple intervention? The answer is no, and why not, right? So that's really around physician education, implicit and explicit biases. You brought up pain. I think that is huge. We are having a whole, education about what the consequences of how pain has been managed and mismanaged, and so all of these are really important points, and I work with great colleagues really studying both that physician-patient interaction and communication, which is hugely important, all the way to people understanding, opioid use during and after pregnancy, treatment, right? All of these things become really, really important. And it's not until we have as I said, we have a whole aspect of our study where we're going to be interviewing women and not only studying their medical records and seeing who did and didn't get the kind of appropriate kind of care, but also what was their experience, because we know that that makes a difference as well. So we're just beginning in these areas, but incredibly important. Sometimes we know as we're building great medical centers, we've sort of lost the human-centered aspects. And the health consequences of that, I think we are just now being able to appreciate. And I love the dinner time conversation. I mean, I think that's so powerful and impactful. So thanks for that.
So I work for Magee, but I'm not at a level of scientific knowledge where I can answer this myself. So I'll ask the two of you, what do you consider the next frontiers in women's health? What are the areas that we're on the cusp of breakthroughs? What are the areas we're gonna be talking about in 5, 10, 20 years? Where do we kind of go from here?
Well, I've been sort of hinting at it. I think we need to have a specific focus on women to understand what's unique. I'm hoping that our work will have some small impact. Just to give you, so there's policy level impacts, right? There's now Medicaid expansion in some states, but not all, that women who are on Medicaid should stay on Medicaid for a full year after pregnancy. So I think there are important policy aspects. In terms of women's health research, I actually think we need to get more, we need to bring our research and our questions and our conversations out into the community, because we won't know the right questions, let alone the right answers, unless we're bringing more women into our research. And then on a more molecular level, I'm biased. I really think pregnancy is this really profound opportunity to understand so much of what we don't yet understand about women's biology. And I think we can do even more to leverage that. So those are my answers from my little window. Mike, you think more broadly.
I'll talk a little bit more on the macro that we see, some of the macro views around AI and the intersection of AI and biology. I think that's a new frontier that we're going towards. I think Janet alluded to it several times, but we've taken a very much, we don't build solutions for people, rather we build them with people approach, right? And it even goes to your question. What we've understood about the relationship between the Black community and healthcare systems is it's been damaged over time. And it's been damaged for a reason, and the distrust has been built up and needs to be rebuilt. And so we're really working hard to work with the community leaders to rebuild that trust so that we can have conversations that move the needle with them, not for them, right? Because they need to understand that they have a voice in shaping their future, and we can support that voice. So I think that is a novel concept that is new, but is forward thinking. And then I think the other emerging science that we see a lot of is the microbiome, understanding the world within us and what that world within us does and how it interacts with the world around us to shape our future. And that's relatively new science that over the last 10 years has grown significantly. So those are the things that we see on the macro side.
Thank you, Janet, Dr. Katov, Mike, Wendy, Nick, and Emily for hosting and providing our members and guests with such an incredibly educational program and lovely lunch. The Magee team has asked me to please, when you get a chance, scan that QR code and provide them with feedback on the event, which I know will be very useful to them. I want to thank our membership engagement and education team led by Margaret Nelson and Kathleen McMinn. They have worked tirelessly for months on planning and coordinating with the Magee team, and we are thrilled that so many of our members, as well as their invited guests, chose to attend. A special shout out to Celeste Campos and Preeti Lobo for managing our invitations and RSVPs. A task not for the faint of heart. I'd also like to thank Julie Kimmel of Jam Productions for our live stream and recording of this program, which will be available on our website in the next week or so. This event marks the beginning of our membership renewal and recruiting program. To our members, now is the time to let us know that you are renewing your membership. Anyone who renews with their donation payment by October 2nd will be entered into a drawing to win one of 3 donated prizes that all involve wine and dinner. So please consider it. They're really good prizes. If you have already renewed and paid, you will be included in the drawing, as well as our evergreen members. To those of you who are our guests today and may be considering joining Impact 100, become part of the impact solution and help us grow so that in 2024, we can reach 400 members and award 4 100,000 grants. As an added incentive, if you join by October 2nd as a new member, your name will be entered into our drawing twice. One of my favorite fictional worlds is Middle-earth from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I've always loved this quote from Gandalf the Wizard. He says, "Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. It is the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love." Please consider joining us as members of Impact 100 Garden State. We ordinary folk can be the light that keeps the darkness at bay. Thank you all again for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day and follow us on social media to stay informed. We've got a lot of upcoming events planned. So thank you all again, and thank you to our wonderful team. Let's hear it one more time for our guests.